First, I want to welcome you all to this salon. I see some familiar faces from different programs that I've run in the past. My name is Kay He. For those of you who aren't familiar, I am the CEO and founder of Rad Reads, which is a blog, a newsletter, online course community, and a coaching practice. I've been at Rad Reads for 9 years, and before that, I was on Wall Street for 15. So I've had a taste of, the very intense kind of professional world of striving and the similarly intense world of online entrepreneurship that also is accompanied by striving and comparison and achievement and so on. And I've tried to strive to find that, like as Katrina said, that healthy balance between goals and striving and achievement and the sense of self. So again, for those of you who are just joining, Jonathan, Nicholas, and Kevin, welcome. My name is Kehi, and you are at a salon on the post-achievement professional. So I'm just going to give you a quick lay of the land. We have 3 hours blocked off, and the reason why it's 3 hours is from past experience in other presentations and talks that we've run. We've had extensive Q&A at the end of kind of like the prepared facilitated remarks. So we will see. I had a coach that the way he ran his coaching sessions was we just keep going till we run out of energy. Right. And so there would be a natural break when we realize we've run out of questions, we've run out of energy. I will leave you ample breaks for bathroom, for water. I will not be talking at you. We have slides, we have visuals. We're going to, again, really have an interactive conversation. Like I said, we've got, I think, 16 people signed up. So it should be a very manageable group to have this meaningful conversation. So with that, I might just make, since I know a bunch of you, I might make Justin the co-host if possible to let people in while I'm presenting. You know what? I can't make you the co-host, so I'm just going to have to deal. All right. So I'm going to kick us off with a slide. I'm going to be toggling back and forth between slides, gallery view, bringing people up to speak. And again, we've got a small group here, so just interrupt me. If you got something to say, try the Zoom hand raise thingy, but just get off mute. Let's really make this an interactive description. As I don't have a co-host, I will not be able to watch the chat as I'm presenting. So if there's something urgent, if you can't hear me or, some glitch with the slides, just use your lovely voices. All right, without any further ado, let me share my screen and kick us off. I've got some slides, again, more to guide the conversation. I use Pitch, which is a wonderful tool. Let me hide my controls. Someone just unmute and just let me know that they can see this slide and the first transition.
Looks great.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. I recognize your voice from a mile away. So welcome everyone to an Inter-Intellect Salon on the Post-Achievement Professional, Life After the Goalposts. My name is Kehi. I am an aspiring post-achievement professional, and I'm excited to be with you all today. This has been a topic that I've been thinking about. I'm turning 45 this year. I've been thinking about this topic probably for 20 years at least. And I have been on some version of the achievement treadmill, the achievement hamster wheel since I was a young child of first generation Cambodian immigrants. Okay, I'm going to start with the story of a fisherman and a banker. Now, there's a banker who goes on vacation down in Mexico, and he meets a fisherman. He meets a fisherman in his boat, and in the morning, the fisherman sells him the most delicious, sells him some fresh fish. The banker takes it back to his villa, cooks the fish, grills the fish, seasons it for his family, and it's the most delicious the freshest, tastiest fish they've ever had. The next morning, he runs back to the fisherman and says how how delicious it was, how excited he was. But he asks the fisherman, he's like, "Well, how many hours do you fish a day?" And the fisherman says, "Well, I wake up early, I load the boat, I go fish for a couple of hours. Then when I get back, I take a nap, I play the guitar, I'll spend some time with my kids, and then we'll have some friends over for some wine, and I'll hang out with my wife." And the banker is confused because the fisherman is sitting on this remarkable asset, this incredible fish. And he says, wait a minute, hold up. I've got an MBA and I've got a plan for you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to raise you a little bit of capital, growth equity, and we're going to scale your operation. We're going to get you a handful of other boats, some more fishermen so that we can increase the production of this incredible fish. Then we will get a distribution center in the capital so that we can truck all of the fish from each of the different ports into the capital and ship it across the world. That's how good the fish is. We will continue to expand our operations, and then soon after that, we will IPO this fishing company, and you will become extremely rich. What do you say? And the fisherman looks confused. And he looks at him, he's like, well, what would I do with all that money? And the banker goes, oh, it's obvious. You could fish for a couple hours, take a nap, play the guitar, hang out with your kids, have a glass of wine with your wife and your friends every evening. So I love that story because it's pithy and it resonates, and it begs the question, right? I mean, are you more the fisherman or the banker? So I'll stop my first screen share here um, and ask, does someone want to volunteer? Are you more the fisherman or are you the banker? Dual choice here.
I am for sure the banker.
Go ahead.
I am for sure the banker.
You're for sure the banker. Say more.
Uh, I. It seems like some sort of. It feels like an exit path to the achievement treadmill, as you noted, because if you have something that generates cash flow, you don't need to achieve anything. You've already achieved it.
Okay. So cash flow gives you the off ramp, right? Got it. Thank you, Oliver, right?
That's right.
Thanks, Oliver. Anyone resonate with the fisherman? Kristen shaking her head.
I do.
Hugo. Okay. Tell us more, Hugo.
Um, so my background, I am a tech entrepreneur in Brazil. I sold my company in the end of 2019. And after that, took a sabbatical, thinking about what I'm going to do with my life after that. But I am in this, I didn't make enough money, so I don't have to work anymore. So I do have to work to maintain my lifestyle. But I'm in the middle of this, and I noticed that, at least for myself, it wouldn't make sense to try to build another company, another bigger company, another bigger exit, and try to find this sense of enough. So I'm trying to balance more stuff. So I deliberately chosen not to build another big company. So work just as much as I can to sustain my current lifestyle, that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely trying. I've been in the banker side in the first part of my life. So I'm now trying to go towards the other side and try to find some balance there. So that definitely resonates with me.
Got it. Thank you for sharing. What a beautiful, we're talking about the off-ramp, right? And then we have, someone like Hugo who is the banker in the sense of sold the company, had an exit, had a thing that many of us on this call are either striving to do or are looking to do. And it's an interesting, I love how pithy that is, because I would say, I'd speak for myself, but let me know if any of this resonates. Is when you hear the story of the banker, of the fisherman, you're like, well, where's the ambition? Where's the drive? Where's the fire? Where are the stakes? Right? Are there any stakes in the fisherman's life? What could go wrong, right? But at the same time, there's this simplicity, there's an ease, there's a deep, deep sense of satisfaction. And again, in the parable, there is this belief that, while everyone's striving to get to a point, that the fisherman he's kind of rigged the game, right? He kind of got there by taking a shortcut, right? And so we're going to look at this tension throughout the conversation today. So I thank you, Hugo. I thank you, Oliver. There could be a lot more to say on the off-ramps, off the question of enough, and of this question of like, where's the fire? What are the stakes? All right, let me go back to my screen. Where did my Chrome browser go? Pardon me. Oh, there we go. All right, so we looked at the fisherman, the banker, and maybe there is an option C. So, all right, today, like I said, we've got a couple hours together, my first salon. So thank you for being with me on this journey. I've been friends with Anna for many, many years. So we're going to talk about this, how this journey to becoming a post-achievement professional begins. We're going to define it. For those of you who know me, I like using matrices, kind of trusted 2x2 matrices. We're going to look at what the roots of achievement culture. How did we get to this point? And then we're going to look at, once you get there, how do you stay in the land of post-achievement? And again, you're going to see throughout this is a salon. So many people are going to have many differing perspectives on, what it means to be a post-achievement professional, how you stay there, and different definitional elements. So a brief introduction for those of you who don't know me. My name is Kei He. I am a writer, I'm a coach, I'm an online entrepreneur, and in a prior lifetime, I worked on Wall Street. So again, a deep, deep understanding of intense drive, intense striving. At age 31, I was promoted. I was one of the youngest managing directors at BlackRock. And at 35, I quit without a plan. And so we'll talk a bit more about my journey. We'll sprinkle it through the conversation. I think it's important to say that for me, a lot of these questions are informed by the fact that my parents are immigrants. And so I'm the child of first generation immigrants who entered this country in the early 70s with a very different mindset on achievement, on financial security, on careers, and on retirement, and on happiness and life satisfaction than a second generation or a child thereof. I always get confused first or second, but I'm the child of first generation immigrants, and what that means from all these questions. I'm also a father. That's played a big role in this journey. I have two girls, Sarai and Amelie, who are 9.5, and 6.5. I'm an avid surfer. I live in LA, but I spent most of my life in New York City. Most of my time now is spent writing, podcasting on these topics. So I have a podcast, the Examine Life podcast, and an email newsletter called Rad Reads that I've been writing for 428 consecutive weeks. And like I said, I coach many people in this journey of becoming an post-achievement professional. And it's something that I've thought deeply, deeply about on my own life, which is why, for one example, I have a podcast called the Examine Life Podcast. So again, I show you maybe pre-achievement K, which is K in yeah, that's probably in my late 20s there, my BlackRock profile picture, and K post-achievement, where maybe I'm a little bit like a fisherman. I surf every day. I don't have calls before 11 o'clock. I have every meal with my kids, but I'm still extremely driven. I'm extremely passionate. I'm extremely ambitious, but I'm not willing to cross certain lines. And so again, I will intertwine my journey throughout this conversation as just a sample of one. Again, please don't take away that these are the rules. This is how you do it. By no means. If anything, we're going to use a much more Socratic method of exploring these questions and really get into the debate. So, I used to live what I call the deferred life plan, which was, I'm going to work really, really, really hard and keep pushing out appreciating life until a later date. So I always wanted to become a surfer, but I thought I would become a surfer when I retired at age 59 and a half because I lived in New York and I was on the grind, right? I thought I would pursue passions like writing and podcasting and so on later, just one more year in Wall Street, one more paycheck, one more thing. And so I was always just looking forward. I was always waiting to start living my life, right? And I hit my own breaking point or my own point of professional awakening. I don't want to use spiritual awakening in that context. At 35 years old, I'm like, what am I doing? Why do I keep doing this for another paycheck? And then I embarked on that journey. I was very much a prisoner to this concept called the when then trap. Now, I want you to drop into the chat. I have a prompt here, but I'll just drop it into the chat. The when then trap says, when I do X, then I'll be happy, right? So a few very common ones. When I hit 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures, then I'll be happy, right? Another common one is with promotions. Once I become a VP, once I become a managing director, once I become a partner, then I'll be happy. Then I'll start living my life. Once I, have a partner, once I have a kid, once I write a book, once I run an Ironman, once I have 100,000 Twitter followers, once I start my YouTube channel, then I will be happy. And I want you all to think back on something where you really, 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 I will stop the share, when you really were pushing yourself, striving towards something big, something that you had invested years of thinking about. And I want you to think about what happened when you got it. Like what happened in that moment, what happened a day after, and what happened a year after, right? Maybe it's running the New York City Marathon. And I'll pick on one of you to answer that after the next slide. I'll come back to the golden handcuffs, but here's what I thought happiness looked like, right? So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great professional and financial milestones in my life, making 6 figures, buying an apartment in New York, getting promoted, being featured as Oprah for Millennials on CNN in 2016. In each case, I thought happiness was a step function where you would immediately level up your happiness as a result of that achievement and then stay there, right? And this is actually one of the reasons that led me to leave Wall Street was because I realized that it actually didn't look anything like the chart on the left, and it looked a lot more like the chart on the right, where the first spike was huge, and then you level back up at a slightly higher level. And then the next spike's not as big, and then you level back up. Yes, you're above the baseline. If you look at the end of that pink line, you're higher than you were where you started. But this this cycle of highs and they come crashing down, and you need a bigger win to maintain the high, and then it comes crashing down, to me felt a lot like the behavior of an addict. And I was someone who drank very heavily for 25 years, basically my whole adult life until very recently. And I remember the first time I had a Zima in 1996, two Zimas, and I was shit-faced. Pardon my French. I do tend to swear a lot, usually when I get excited. So swearing is correlated with excitement level. And then come, 28 years into drinking, I would need to have 5 stiff tequila drinks just to get a buzz, right? And so what I realized was this was the first sign that, wait a minute, this step function belief of happiness, this when then trap, the arrival fallacy, some people might call it, is actually something's off here. And that was a key realization for me to actually start stepping off the treadmill. So I'll stop here, and I'll try to rotate through the crowd, but I'll admit that some people don't want to always volunteer and raise their hands. But has anyone experienced that? Something you wanted so badly, you committed years of mental energy striving for it. You get it. Tell us what happens the day you get it, 1 month after, and 1 year later. Does anyone want to jump in here?
I'll jump in.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Katrina.
Hi, Katrina.
Fellow Angelino. I was like, earlier I wanted to answer the question about being a fisherman, and I was like, by definition of living in LA, can I be a fisherman? I since high school wanted to be like a school leader or hold some kind of leadership position within a school. I was always been fascinated with education systems. And I did end up getting a role that I, was very proud of and still am. But there's something about having this ideal that you strive for, but it's not until you do it that you actually can feel the effects of what it does to your body, to your daily life. I now like to talk, like when I write down a goal, I call it like a marathon or a pregnancy, because it helps me like viscerally feel that this is going to be like going to take something from my body to do. And it did. Being a school leader, running a school is a very taxing job. I still feel very proud of the work I did, but it also had some of the lowest moments I had as far as burnout, because I was managing so many different relationships, and I hadn't really understood my own personal sort of things that actually need to get worked out in therapy, and understand like, how does that all interplay with, how does like excitement also look like anxiety, also look like excitement? You know what I mean? And my just so like years of never really being in tune with my body. So I did, I got the role the first month, and I was basically I always had this mentality of just get, whatever needs to get done, get it done. 12-hour days, whatever needed to do. I never questioned what the personal cost to me things were taking. It was just, I've been living out the ideal that I've had since I was a kid, and that's meaningful, and as if I could eat meaning for breakfast, but I cannot. So yeah, and then a year later, I was like one of my lowest moments where I was like in my like shower, just kind of dry heaving, like levels of anxiety, just from also personal life things. But again, all of it was just unaccounted for burnout, that I wasn't even understanding why I was like hitting these levels of sort of panic in myself. And so now I left the role and I'm in a sabbatical for 6 months. So far 6 months, and I'm just like, wow, what an achievement it is to like have breakfast and meals on time and take a walk, to just feel rested. And that's it. I read a couple books, like 4,000 hours or weeks or something like that. 4,000 weeks and Good Enough Job. And then it kind of just helped me really crack that burnout from work. And also those books really helped me truly reevaluate what it meant to what I was doing with my addiction to work, I would say.
Thank you. That sounds like a fisherman day, right? Enjoying the breakfast, going for a walk. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love this question, this what you brought up about well, burnout will play a big role in this conversation. But also for this question about feeling, right? And I think that if you're drawn to this talk, you might not, and maybe I'm speaking a little bit more for the Rad Reads community that have heard versions of this, but you might not be as much of a feeler and much more of a thinker, right? Living in your head, living in the world of ideas, the world of thoughts, the world of like a constructed self, like, oh, who am I? What am I chasing? What am I building? What have I done? And one thing that hit me, this was a great talk between, I'm a big Sam Harris fan. He's a meditation teacher, a neuroscientist, a philosopher, incredibly smart person, speaks very well to the left brain folks. And he was at this interview with Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom, and he said, think about any achievement. Like, let's say you want to get promoted, right? You want to get promoted and you think about this promotion for years, right? It consumes you. It's actually in you physically, right? And then like your boss calls you or brings you into their office, like, hey, you've been promoted. There's this like wave of physical emotions, of physical feelings that come up. You smile, you might feel lightheaded, you might get like goosebumps and all that. And then the physical sensations eventually go away. And then what happens? How do you revive? How do you bring back that feeling? You have to keep thinking about, oh, I got promoted to this thing. And even then, you can't bring back that physical sensation that came from that promotion. And so what can you do? I've thought about it myself is, well, you can start telling people that you got promoted. And when you see people's reaction, it re-evokes that feeling like, oh, wow, they think I'm smart. They think I'm talented. But again, if you think about it, this connection between what we think and what we feel, I think is a very important gateway to a much broader conversation on the role achievement plays in our lives. So I'll put a pin there. It's something that we can revisit at later points, and something that's been very powerful to me in different like modes of therapy and healing. But I might begin. Does anyone want to piggyback off of what Katrina said, or share their own experience of like this thing they held on to so deeply, and what happened? Thank you for the visual, or you in the shower dry heaving, right? Because of the burnout of the thing that you thought would bring that enduring and abiding peace and happiness.
I can add something, Kate. It's tangential, but like I think I would strive for like professional and financial achievements and reach like benchmarks, but then I kind of realized that, at least me personally, like every time I would do that, I would kind of raise the standard of my living more. So like the thing that I was maybe hoping or striving for, like I want to make more money so that I have more free time to spend with my family, or more free time to pursue hobbies. But and maybe it's just that like addictive mentality, but like every time it's like I make more money, then I would justify buying more, raising my standard of living, buying more gadgets, doing more things. And then it became this like vicious cycle of needing to continue working and not having actually more free time. I don't know if anyone else relates to that, but
Yeah. Thank you, Justin. So you're bringing up lifestyle creep, kind of the phrase for that, more colloquially known as keeping up with the Joneses, which we'll talk a lot about because, in there's a whole element of status, right? It's like if you double your money, there's probably some relationship to how you see yourself, how you want others to see you. And there is that kind of constant moving of the goal line. So we will definitely come back on that. So thank you, Justin and Katrina, and I'll go back to the screen share. All right. Okay, so I've created this post-achievement matrix of sorts. And again, I'm playing with this, but I thought that it was a pretty interesting way to frame the conversation. So I'm also very visual and kind of linear thinker. So on the vertical axis, you have post-achievement and pre-achievement. And on the horizontal axis, you have kind of pre-financial and post-financial, right? And so let's kind of go through each quadrant and kind of take a look at what that might stand for. So kind of pre-financial, pre-achievement are, I call it the eager beavers, right? They are the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, newly minted college grads, excited to enter the workforce, excited to start companies, excited to make their little dent in the universe. I'll make a quick note about the eager beavers. I'm 1979, so I'm a young Gen X, although many of you will say that I probably behave more like a Gen Z or a millennial. But what I will say, even as a Gen X, is, I have seen the change. We've all seen the change of, what a college graduate might strive for relative to older generations, whether it's the the big house and the picket fence, or starting at the bottom of the hierarchy to become the CEO 25 years later at the same company. Feels like a lot of that has changed, even with that kind of eager beaver group. We won't spend too much time talking about the eager beavers. And then we get to the kind of post-achievement pre-financial, right? And again, what do I mean by pre and post financial? It will be a little muddy, but you could think of like post financial people don't have to worry about money, and pre financial people worry about money. Now, one thing we'll talk about later is that there are people with $100 million who worry about money, and there are people with $10,000 who don't worry about money. So the relationship between money and worry is not always directly proportional to the amount in your bank account. And as someone who coaches a lot of people who are post-financial, people who have had 7, 8, 9-figure exits, 9 figures being $100 million plus, I can assure you that many of them still worry about money. So we'll talk about that. But again, you could think of post and pre-financial not having to worry about money and worrying about money. So the top left quadrant, Henrys. I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but Henrys are high earners, not rich yet, right? So these are kind of elder millennials, people working in more traditional industries, in FANG, at Wall Street, consulting, medicine, law, industries that are known to pay well in the West. Why are they post-achievement? Because many of them are starting to question, right? Am I going to be doing this the rest of my life? Is this it? Is this really what I've been put on this earth to do? And they're starting to, like Katrina, like Justin, like the story that I shared, they're starting to realize that, like, whoa, every marginal achievement is not feeling as good as it did. That first one, right? It's like getting your first car, the beat up Subaru that your parents gave you, right? Versus maybe buying, an Audi in your 40s, right? There's one that feels way better than the other. So that's a group of Henrys. They're pre-financial, right? They still definitely are in the wealth building phase of their life, but they're starting to say, like, is the gig up here? And then there's post-achievement, post-financial. These are people that have achieved a lot and that don't need to worry about money. Exited founders, Wall Street CIOs, CEOs, things like that, right? You could say by many Western standards, they've achieved the pinnacle of business success. And so NAW, it's not a worry in the world. And again, I put an asterisk there because trust me, like I said, in my one-on-one practice, I work with a lot of people in that top right quadrant. They have a lot of worries, about identity, a lot of worries about money, a lot of worries about sense of self, a lot of worries about relationships, and so on. And then I was like, well, this matrix needs to be rounded out. who is pre-achievement, who hasn't achieved much, and post-financial doesn't have to worry about money? Trust fund kids. And it's funny, I suspect that there's probably not no trust fund kids on this call. I know that in my Rad REITs community, there are none, right? So that's kind of a quadrant that we won't be spending much time with. When I was in New York this summer, I hosted an event, and there were a lot of people from FANG, so Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Google, those types of companies, Twitter. And for the first time in a long, long time, there had been layoffs in FANG. And FANG has always been, it's kind of like the new Wall Street, at least for someone in their mid 40s, where it's like everyone wanted to be on Wall Street in the early 2000s. And now everyone wants to be at Google and so on, high quality of life, high income, relatively low stress. You're well taken care of. What was interesting, though, was that I found that, so it was interesting that there were a lot of layoffs concentrated in that kind of first 6 months of the year. And there are a lot of folks that were kind of in this red bubble. Like, were they post-financial? Not in the sense that they never needed to work again, but there were people who had earned really well, who had saved well, who were single or childless or not looking after children, where they're like, I don't need to work for a long time. And then there were other people that like, I have the buffer to really think about what I want to do next. I can downshift, I can do something for less income. And it was just a really, really fascinating time, because a lot of them actually didn't re-enter kind of a high earning trajectory. And again, they hadn't made, I hate the phrase, but let's just call it FU money. They hadn't come anywhere close to that. And they were relatively young, in their mid 30s. But they had said, you know what, I'm off that treadmill. I'm not replaying. I'm not going from Google to Amazon. I'm not going from Facebook to Wall Street. I'm not going from consulting to law, right? They had said, I'm just going to try something completely different, downshift my life, and downshift, again, the relationship with traditional achievement. Oops. Then I want to say each quadrant is personal. So, so I have spoken on my podcast about my own finances. I had a great financial run at Wall Street. I spend a decent amount of money, mostly on housing and travel. But I work about 30 hours a week on my own terms, pretty intensely, but no meetings, fully asynchronously. I surf, like I said. And so in my mind, this is why the definitions vary. In my mind, I'm post-financial. I don't worry about money, but I spend a lot of it, so I need to earn it to keep up with that spending. But a lot of people would look at my life and they're like, okay, you've written in a newsletter for 429 consecutive weeks. You publish a podcast every week. You publish a YouTube video every week. You are not post-financial. Like, you got to work, right? And so, I want you to take that matrix with a grain of salt, so to speak, is that, again, one person's version of post-achievement is not the other person's post-achievement. So you can kind of tailor it to your own way. One person's version of post-financial is not post-financial, someone else's version of post-financial. So with that, I'll pause. And does anyone feel very strongly about the quadrant that they're in? So remember, you've got pre-achievement, pre-financial, starting off. You've got post-achievement, pre-financial, where you're like, the gig, something feels a bit off on this game. You're starting to question the playbook. Post-achievement, post-financial, you're done. You've achieved everything you wanted to achieve. You never need to worry about money again. Where do people feel like they sit in that quadrant?
Can you hear me? I'll talk through this microphone instead of my
Yes.
AirPods. Okay.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hello, I'm Jonathan. Yeah, so I'll give you a very brief history of
Yes.
me, and then I'll tell you where I land, and I think you'll probably be able to guess before I tell you that. So I did a PhD in astrophysics. That's how I started out of the gate. Did a couple years as a researcher after that. Um, so about a decade in academia. And then I switched to the tech industry and worked there for roughly a decade. Did some startup stuff, and then for almost 6 years was at Apple, so one of the FANG. So I was there for 6 years. And I basically quit and have been taking a sabbatical since May of last year.
Okay.
So I'm like month 7 or 8 now, and have a toddler, have a 1.5-year-old at home, and have been spending time doing, let's say, like educational YouTube videos on like science topics, basically science and data science type things. That's kind of been what I've been doing, and with no expectation of like real monetary success, but as a thing that has some purpose there. In terms of the post-achievement success thingy, like where you put the little highlight of where the FANG
Yeah.
kids were, that's like, basically like, yeah, that's about right. So anyway, that's how I would place where I am.
Yeah. Thank you. Congrats, by the way. Very
Thank you.
illustrious career. Um,
Thanks.
you know, what you said, 10 years in academia, 10 years at FANG. It's a very, I mean, not I don't want to diminish it, but it's a very, you know, you've accumulated many of the prestige markers
Yeah.
of professional kind of Western. I say Western just because I know that it's
Yeah.
we can kind of easily, we know what that means when I frame it that way. And yeah, I wonder, do you feel like, what's your relationship to achievement right now?
So for me, achievement is very separate from money, like in terms of how I think about it. So I mean, when I started out, I was going the academic route, so I had no illusions that I was going to be pulling down some sort of real money. To be, it was just like the things I wanted to achieve were much more on the kind of the intellectual side. I wanted to actually learn something about the universe that no one had learned before, and like kind of push the frontier of knowledge out in some small little area that probably no one cares about, but I still actually did something, real in the grand scheme of things. That was kind of where I was oriented. And then when I did the money thing, it's definitely a means to an end. So I don't have any hangups about it. But like, so money's great, but yeah, it's definitely a thing that enables you to have freedom to do other things. Is how I view it, at least. Yeah. So then, yeah, I think in terms of my time in academia, in terms of tech stuff, I definitely made the money piece that helped. Achievement wise, like the things I'm kind of proud of are like the team that I led and like kind of the personal development and the professional development of the people around me. That's the part I feel like I had some achievement for. But it feels very separate for me from the money side
Yeah,
of that.
thank you. Do you, if you feel comfortable sharing, what's your relationship with money right now, as you know,
Yeah. So
conceptual?
my wife also has a PhD in astrophysics and also went into the tech industry. So we're kind of like in some ways have a very parallel
Does your
path.
toddler
She's
have a PhD in astrophysics?
not yet, not yet. We'll work on some flashcards soon. Um, but but she still works. So that lets pressure off of the need to make the money situation work out. And we still live in Silicon Valley, so it's incredibly expensive here.
Got it.
So for now, at least, one of us is working, and that's just kind of smooths over the rough patches
Mhm.
in terms of like requiring it. But
Got it.
yeah, that's our
Yeah.
situation there.
And
And
I
we
think,
have a reasonable, comfortable,
yeah,
cushion. We're not.
yeah. And I think that goes to show that, you know, where you are on that would you say you're to the right of the line of like post financial, or are you the left
Yeah,
of
I
post?
would say yes in the sense that, and my wife and I have talked about this a lot. We're like, if we were to move somewhere, we can make the not needing to worry about it for a very long time kind of a thing. And also, I do like doing things and
Yeah.
making videos and stuff. I am very active and I don't want to not do stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, turning on some minor money spigot is possible. Like that can kind of do stuff as well. So let's say just to the right of the line. I think we could make it work if we wanted to move and kind of decide to have a different physical environment from where we are. Where we
Yeah.
are right now, we have to kind of keep
Yeah.
keep grinding a little bit otherwise.
Yeah, I saw Amal raise their hand, but I'll add just really quickly. Say similar. It just shows how it can be different. How every situation is different. Is my wife is an artist and she's been the primary caretaker of our kids, and so that just means we're a one income family, and so there's always like I always need to do something to bring in income. So that's a way to shift the the financial line, right? With number of income generators in a household. But another one is like where you choose to live. I lived in Dumbo and now I live in Manhattan Beach, which are probably top 10 zip codes in cost of living in America. If I downshifted 50% on zip codes, I wouldn't need to work for 10 years. But it's a choice that I've made, which is why I view myself as being post-financial, because like I said, the work doesn't feel like work to me. This doesn't feel like work to me. And there is that, if things were to not go well financially, there's a lot of options to cut things out. And obviously lifestyle creep would hinder some things and you get used to living a certain way. It's harder to cut them out. But I also believe that we'd be somewhat resistant to that if push came to shove.
That resonates very well with, I agree.
Amal, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and apologies if I'm not.
Yeah, no worries. Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm like calling for my card. My day is totally shifted. I like really wanted to do this, so I'm making it work. Based in the Northeast, split my time between Boston, the Berkshires, and New York City, and I'm also a lowly tech professional, and I'm kind of in this, I'm in my mid to late 30s, and I think for me, I've been on this, like 2 years ago, I made a plan for myself, like 10 years, and that's it. Like 10 more years of working in corporate life, and that's it, because it's a complete grind. I love what I do, but it's a grind. And I think for me, if I'm honest with myself, it's not that I don't want to work in 10 years. I want to have a huge career after 10 years. It's more that, in 10 years, I want to have it like, excuse my French, but my goal was to have enough fuck you money so that like, if I'm in this job that's like a complete grind, I don't want to be, in my mid to late 40s, where I'm like, probably have more responsibilities in life, in terms of family responsibilities, and be stuck in this job that I'm happy with, right? Like I want to be able to walk away from my job. I want to be able to take a less stressful job. I want to be able to make less money if I choose to. But the reality is like, I don't feel like that's what I want to do. I think I'm just looking to kind of unshackle myself from like corporate life. And what I really want to do is like teach and write books and like do social entrepreneurship projects, like there's this whole other career. And for me, having that fuck you money, having I'm really in a fortunate position to not really have that except for like a mortgage and stuff like that, but being able to not, I want to be completely debt free and have the money to kind of buy me that freedom, so to say, in about 8 to 10 years. And so I feel like I'm making this short-term sacrifice, but but the compromise is like, don't go crazy in the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to get to my mid to late 40s and like be completely burnt out physically, mentally, where I need like another 10-15 years just to recover from that, right?
Yeah.
So what's the balance? And like I'm still trying to kind of really come to terms with like my relationship with money and trying to understand like, I see it as this tool that enables me to do other things. Like I've never seen money as this thing that's like, I'm never kind of like precious golem. Like I don't have that like miserly love of money, but it's an enabler. And so like, how do I keep myself honest with that relationship, you know, as my, because right, we've already had lifestyle creep, you know, my husband and I, he's also in tech. And so, you know, we already have a great life. And so how do I not like, you know, how do I keep myself honest with that? So I think that's kind of like where I am. I don't think I'm post achievement or post financial, even though really like realistically, like I was just talking to a therapist about this, like I could quit right now. And I have like worked at like the types of jobs that I've had and the projects that I've been able to work on and the money that I've been able to make in my career is such that like it's already something that I would have, you know, me 10 years ago would have been just happy with, you know what I mean? And so, like, how do I keep how do I
I
keep
love
myself,
that.
you know, honest, you know, about that. So that's I think that's the challenge for me. So I don't want to get sucked into this vortex of more, you know, or shifting goalposts, you know.
Thank you for sharing, Amal. And yeah, actually, that'd be a good point. I want you all, because I mean, you wouldn't have come here if you weren't strivers at some point, maybe still in your life. And so I want you to, let's just do like a little sidebar here and picture like a 10-year-old you. Okay. So let's run like actually let's close our eyes and do this. I was not planning to do this, but I like turn off, well, not you, Amal, because you're driving. But let's close our eyes, turn off your video if you feel more comfortable closing your eyes with your video off. I'll do it. So close your eyes and really picture 10-year-old you. All right. And take a few like big, deep inhales, belly breaths, and really remember that kind of 10-year-old you. Think about the surroundings that you are, maybe your old house, your old apartment, the smells, what you might be wearing. And think about what 10-year-old you wanted for future you, right? At the time. And 10-year-old you, so you're there, and then you of today, you right now walks into the room and meets 10-year-old you. What is 10-year-old you thinking about this grown-up in front of them, this grown-up that you've become? What might 10-year-old you say to this grown-up? What is 10-year-old you feeling towards this grown-up version of you? So just sit with that for another breath or two. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And when you're ready, turn your video back on. Does anyone want to share?
I mean, I felt very grateful and very blessed. It was like pretty moving actually. If I, yeah, I don't know, by any means, very, yeah, just like makes me want to be more happy with what I have. I don't know if I could say anything deeper than that, but it was just filled me with a lot of gratitude for my situation.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Anyone else?
I'll share. I definitely felt also gratitude for something that really it's this skill I feel like I've developed as an adult, which is like the ability to come home or feel recentered. I feel really proud of that ability. I feel like at this age, I don't know what is ahead, but there's a confidence that who I am today will be able to figure it out, even if figuring it out means doing nothing and like letting it sit and observing. And it took experiences and time to be in that place. And so that's what my youngest part of me felt really proud of with who I am today.
Yeah, beautiful. The first time I did that, I was in tears because my younger me was just like, he's like, I'm so proud of you. You know, I'm getting teared up just thinking about it. It's just like, I'm so proud. Right. And I think that a lot of it was that little kid didn't realize, didn't have the confidence, didn't didn't see his own potential, didn't believe in himself, was probably scared that he would live in a perpetual state of fear or not enoughness. And then to kind of see him, see me in pick any time horizon, 10 years, 2 years, 7 years, he'd be like, what the fuck? Like, this is what you did? So just like a tremendous amount of pride. So thank you all. Like I said, this is a salon. I did not plan on that, but we're gonna go where the energy takes us. Katrina.
Can I make a quick comment? Because I just remembered.
Yes.
I have no idea why my camera keeps panning to more of my room that I'm trying to hide. So, anyways, I was actually in another intellect salon where someone was hosting sort of this, it's like an internal family systems sort of practice. And I remember actually we did that in the session. We were talking about our relationship with work, and it was actually this like moment I had where being able to reach inside myself and talk to myself and show myself gratitude and pride and give myself the feeling that I was really desperately seeking for from other people, like that validation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was an interesting practice because it wasn't like this, sometimes you self-talk or you say things nice to yourself, but you don't believe it. And it was suddenly something like clicked and it sat with me that like, I no longer wanted that praise or whatever it was to come externally. Like I'm happy and I can say thank you when it came, but something in me clicked where I was like, I feel complete in just this exercise alone. And I just hope if anyone in here has had that opportunity to go through that and think about that sort of exercise in relationship with the addiction cycle, with what we seek from work, it's a really powerful experience.
Thank you, Katrina. Could you share that just a 1-minute TLDR of what internal family systems is? Because it's a new concept. I've just learned about it in the past year. And this exercise, I didn't draw the line to internal family system, but I'm like, this probably was somehow stimulated by something that I learned from internal family systems.
Yeah, so it's the idea that there are parts of you, not in this in a very real sense, in the sense that like when in family systems, you observe the relationship between members of a family, and you imagine in your body there are parts of you that have a different kinds of relationship with each other. And as you learn more about IFS, there's very specific kinds of names for these parts, and I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, but it's super important to really get to know and see those different parts of yourself. It's kind of like seeing your inner child, but imagining you have multiple inner children with different needs. And it's important to sit with every, every child in you and listen. And part of that, there's like somatic IFS, which is when you feel like tension in your body, you talk to that tension as if it's a part. So in this exercise I did with intellect, everyone kind of sat and thought about an experience. Maybe it was like some experience with work, and explored where's that tension in the body. And then each of us asked ourselves to talk to that tension as if it was a part of yourself, and how to show compassion and kindness in a way that allowed it to be seen and feel like real release, and say what it needs, what that part of you needs. And it's real. Usually you can go back and listen. I've done this multiple times in like therapy, and it's really powerful because it actually is a very visceral experience to close your eyes and listen to what a story that's like been in you or attention that's been in you and what it needs and what it's trying to say. I'm still pretty new to IFS, but there's a lot of it in the Twitter world in terms of what people are practicing, but that's kind of a rough gist. There are parts of you and there's relationships between those parts, and it's important to understand your part's needs.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. And so some of those parts, like there's the perfectionist, the protector, the people pleaser, the taskmaster, the angry, the rage, the protector, and the way, again, I'm total noob here, but they've all served different roles. They've all played different roles in different parts of your life, and none of them. One of the main books is called No Bad Parts by Dick Schwartz, and none of them are bad. They just may have not outlived their usefulness for the phase of life that you're in, and how can you recommunicate that with them. And I really like, I'm glad you brought that up, Katrina, because if you're attracted to a talk on the post-achievement professional, like I said at the beginning, and this is maybe my bias, you're not a natural feeler, you're a natural thinker, and you use thoughts to kind of solve all problems and challenges. And personally, I've kind of moved beyond, or not moved beyond that. I've done so much talk therapy, so much, and I'm stuck. I know the problems, I know the patterns, I know where they came from, but I'm stuck. And it wasn't until this kind of like more the somatic, the felt sense, IFS, psychedelics, where you can kind of break through to that next level. And so again, I share this as someone who was very much like we almost got divorced because my inability to feel and to be such a cerebral person. My wife, who's an artist, is a deep, deep feeler, where we just couldn't communicate with each other, because you can't communicate feelings with pure like hyper rationality. Just like it's like telling someone stop worrying about money. Like you can't just stop. You can't push a button and just stop worrying about money. There's a whole set of like reactions that are happening in you in that. So amazing. More tangents. Let us get back to I was like, I have 50 slides. I'm like, is that enough for 3 hours? I'm like, oh, we're going to need more than 3 hours. So, all right. Speaking of worrying about money, right? As I said, and I'll need someone to just actually, I'll play it and we can go back. But this post-financial, I'm glad that Jonathan brought up the point, is like, yeah, he's like, I kind of feel post-financial. And this is, for those of you who don't know, Scott Galloway and Sam Parr, two big internet personalities. Scott Galloway, $100 million of net worth. Sam Parr, $20 million of net worth. And you can't just tell them, stop worrying about money. Let me play this clip for you.
I'm still trying to make a shit ton of money. I still feel financially very insecure. I still worry about a recession becoming a depression, and I'm the guy who lost it again. I've lost it all a couple times. And so I don't feel I'm at that point where I don't have financial anxiety. I do sleep with one eye open.
This doesn't make sense for Sean, because Sean is not worried about money at all. He's got this thing that I like to call like good emotional health. He's very emotionally healthy. His parents did him well, and he's talked to me about this. I sold my company 2 or 3 years ago, and I made a fair bit.
What did you make? I'm naked here. What did you make?
Yeah, let's go, Sam.
See?
You gotta say
he's hesitant. He's hesitant because he's worried people listen. Okay, go ahead.
At the end of the process, I walked away with about $20 million.
And how old are you?
I was about 30. I was 30.
So I share that because, again, post-financial really, like, I think you could see even like Scott Galloway, I don't have a good read on him. And again, reading internet personality is probably not a great use of time. But you could see with Sam that there is a true discomfort in there. And again, it's this felt, he goes on to say that, he's worried all the time that he's going to lose all of his money. And so I just want to reiterate that like post-financial can mean a lot of things to different people. And, if you are worried about money when you have X, there's a possibility that the worry at Y will still will still persist. And we'll talk more about that. All right. Okay, so let's get to the next part. How do you become a post-achievement professional? There's a picture of a pie here because akin to the story of the fisherman and the banker, there's this funny parable of what is it like to become a partner at a law firm? And partners at law firms do well. You know, they can bill. You know, at white shoe corporate law firms, you're making 7 figures a year. They say being a partner at a law firm is like winning a pie eating contest where the prize is more pie, right? And so I encourage you to think about like the thing that you were chasing. We talked about the when then trap. We talked about the banker that was just the next thing is like, is the prize more pie, right? And so how does this journey, how do you start to break through to this next level of like what it means to live kind of beyond as a post-achievement professional? And so we talked about that already, right? Realizing that the chase, the hamster wheel, the treadmill, the deferred life plan are deeply, deeply unsatisfying, right? The goalposts moving, right? Katrina sharing vulnerably and honestly that, you know, a year later, Katrina's dry heaving in the shower because of the thing that she'd wanted for years, right? Another one, brush with mortality, major life event, and one that we'll come back to at the end, maybe losing the self-obsession, right? When I left Wall Street, there were a few reasons. One, as I showed in that chart, was I just wanted more. It was like, okay, I got this bonus, feels good, and then the next 2 minutes later, why did I get less than this person? Right? The game of comparison. Extreme stress, alopecia, chunks of my hair would fall out. I have ground through all of my enamels on my teeth from night grinding. I've been a night grinder since I was a young kid, which ironically enough, about 8 years after leaving Wall Street, I finally stopped grinding my teeth. So that's how long it takes for stress to move through your body. 8 years it took. There's a scarcity mindset among the people that I worked with. I had a child we'll talk about, and I was like, whoa, I could see the passage of time. And then I just felt numb, comfortably numb, that should say, and asked myself, like, is this it, right? It's like deep sense of angst, like this, there's more to life than this. I want to talk about a brush with mortality where on a recent episode of our podcast, I interviewed Manisha Thakor, who was a driven professional in financial services. She wrote a book. It's a good book called Money Zen. And she talks about not one, but 2 brushes of mortality where she was, which finally led her to kind of step off the achievement treadmill. So the first one, she gets dengue fever on a trip to Laos, comes back to New York, is like, I think like coughing up blood and extremely low blood pressure to the point that they fly in her parents and her brother to say she's in her mid-30s to basically say goodbye. And she's there in the hospital bed and she makes it. And she says in her book and on the interview, 3 days later, she was talking to her assistant about how she could set up an office in the hospital room because she had to be in the hospitalized for 3 months. So brush with mortality. Once she knows she's good, she's right back up where she began. Second brush with mortality, she has something Ames-Barr disease. I think it's an autoimmune. No, it's a virus. It's like extreme mono. And because of the residual effect of this first brush with mortality, the doctor said she was 49 at this point, and she was on 6-month bed rest. And the doctor specifically said, if there's significant changes of cortisol in your body, you may die. and she had just launched her book. She was doing the podcast and the press tour. But with a little bit of more, maybe the second brush, the 49 years, a little bit more age, she realized that this was actually her time. And what she said is she realized that what she really wanted in life at the first place was what she called financial independence, which was hitting her enough number, which was just living living in a small cabin. I forget, I think on Lake Michigan. The second was simplicity. She wanted a simple life. And the third was small joys, right? But it took her 49 years and 2 brushes with mortality to really fully get that and step off the achievement treadmill to become a post-achievement professional. This is another friend. This was a fit 45-year-old friend of mine, father of 4, who had a very severe health crisis. He had to call his family in and his kids, his young kids, and say like, look, dad might not make it. And I don't want to read them all, but I wanted to read number 3, where he kind of came out of the brush, and he realized I cut 90% of my commitments when I was sick. Now that I'm back to 90%, I didn't refill the busyness. It was actually a great opportunity to reset all elements of my life and be more thoughtful about choosing things. Right? So it's just it's a thoughtfulness and intentionality of choosing things. We've talked already about burnout. I mean, a brush with mortality is a 10x more extreme version of burnout. I'm going to skip the question here. Another milestone, I call it the magic window. And so Jonathan mentioned a toddler of a year and a half. The magic window is it's a life event that shows you that there's a unique window of time in front of you. And the drive of achievement, the need for money or a lot of money might actually take a backseat to this window. And I always call this the puppy dog years of parenthood. So my eldest daughter is 10. She's probably about to close the window, this magic window. But it's basically, it was an observation that I had, is like when you and your partner are the center of your kid's universe. They want no one else but you, right? You are the greatest thing. They only want to hang out with you, mom, dad, parents. That's all that matters, right? And then one day, it's not that they love you less, but their friends come into their picture. Their significant others come into the picture. You know, for my eldest daughter, Olivia Rodrigo comes into the picture, right? And that window closes. And I don't look at that window with scarcity, so to speak. But it definitely has made me think about, it was like, well, what if I changed my relationship to achievement and money to spend that time with my kids the way I want to in that magic window? And I read this from a friend, Jeremy Walter, who said, as a dad of small kids, I sometimes think we have it backwards. We work really hard in our 30s and 40s, when in reality, that's the most valuable time with our children. Perhaps we should all coast through the middle years and then work hard when the kids start heading out on their own. And it's interesting because Jeremy Walter is a financial advisor, and he is in a business that is actually very, very high leverage, in the sense that once you have a financial advisory business, the next it's like it's like having a digital product, so to speak. The marginal cost to deliver the next product, the next service, is actually close to zero. And so every dollar that you raise beyond is extremely high leverage, right? And in this case, Jeremy said, he's like, well, I can cover my living expenses. I can save a reasonable amount. I'm just going to hit pause on this lever and then maybe reconsider kind of turning it back on. So I will pause there. Amal has a hand raise.
Yeah, so that was really special. Thank you so much for sharing. like I'm struggling with this right now because I want to have kids and I keep pushing it off. Like every 6 months, I'll be like, oh, let's wait another 6 months. Oh, let's wait another 6 months, you know. And I had to kind of sit with myself and say, like, why do I keep pushing this off? Well, it's like I don't feel ready. Well, like I'm never gonna feel ready. So like what gives, you know? And the reality is like there's this like, if I'm honest with myself, there's the fear of like how it's gonna impact my career and my art, which in turn kind of to some degree affects, the lifestyle that I can offer, a child. But there's also just kind of this all the friction, the societal friction that like working professionals have that are parents, and this quote is beautiful. Yeah, let's like focus on our kids while they're young, and you know um we should all be kind of in our 50s and beyond, like focusing more on our careers because we're not raising little ones. That's great in theory, but like it's kind of like how do you live how do you live like that in a society that's like going in a complete opposite direction, right? Like I just mean like there's it's like societal pressure is real basically. And so and I can't change tech culture like as much as I want to, as much as I maybe just even being participating in it as a woman of color, I'm changing it ever so slightly. But the reality is, it's like, yeah, I can't change corporate culture. I can't change tech culture. I can't change the way people are going to see me as a pregnant woman, as an engineering leader or whatever, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm excited to carve that path and be that person, but it comes with a lot of trepidation, too. And so this is kind of just like, okay, well, I feel like as a woman, you can have it all, but just not at the same time. And for me, like I have a really hard time compromising with that, you know. So just because my male colleagues don't have to go through that, they're probably seen as more responsible being parents, as opposed to me. So.
Yeah, no, that's extremely poignant, extremely a perspective that even someone like myself can't appreciate as much, who who has a wife who's primary caretaker, who has sacrificed their career for my career. I wonder, I put that as I reflect that back as an open question, right? I mean, how do you deal with societal pressures? How does this sound good in theory and completely impractical?
In my case, I think it's helped. I mean, I'm 25, so I'm younger than all of everyone here. Still probably in a stage of delusion in many realms. But yeah, I think what's helped me is just to, well, first of all, just limit my contact with a lot of this pressure. So my screen time is probably like 2 hours per day, and part of that is just like clocks at the gym and stuff like that. Limit Instagram and all these different things, and always going back to, like as you said, like probably many of us here are the thinking type, and I've been going more into the emotional side across the last 2 years, but that's still my tendency, and it's having this sort of clarity over a vision that I have and my values and how what I'm doing aligns with that. So last year, for example, was a year of just understanding myself and what I actually wanted. And this year I started not working, so I haven't been working since December, just to align those inner values with the external world. Because for the last 5 years, I've done like branding and marketing consulting, also for tech, so a lot of revenue oriented. That's not who I want to be, so I'm refusing to work with them, at least right now. But I always have to be going back, and it's tough. I think like many of personal experiences have helped, but when you showed the like window thing metaphor, which I forgot the name of, I thought about how the usual case in which there are events that make you reconsider how you're acting. And I think for the last 2 years, I've always been like questioning what I'm doing. And my mom passed away last April at 50. And that really made me change this view of, how long I have to live. And instead of making me more anxious about achieving things, how I've always been, it's made me more just at peace with what I have and comfortable, and maybe slow down and take time off work. Notice that I'm 25 and I live in, well, I'm nomadic, but I've had the benefit of always working with the US. So being like, hey, you're 25, and since you've been 20, you've been earning like, middle class US in a country where you don't really need that. So let's appreciate it more. And that's what's working right now. How long that will work, I don't know, but that's what has worked right now. Just clarity over who I am, or who I am at the moment, and how what I'm doing is aligning with that.
Yeah, I super appreciate that perspective, Nicholas. I just want to share, like, I spent, like, our primary home is in the Berkshires, which is like this magical place. I invite you to all come and visit us. It's in Western Massachusetts, right near the New York border, and it's, this place of artists and nature and food and culture. You kind of get the best of a city and the best of like country, and very progressive values. And so I have all these like, what I call like hippie friends, and I call myself like hippie adjacent now. And what I've noticed with all my hippie friends, right, that are very different than all of my other kind of like many of my other life friends that I made in cities where, people are kind of hustling in one capacity or another, is people just live their life like in a way that's so on their terms, you know? But but I look back at a lot of what enables that. And the reality is like it's privilege, it's inherited money, it's grandma's house, it's yeah, it's sure, like maybe they don't have as fancy of a lifestyle or whatever, but at the same time, like there's a privilege that enables that, right? And I think that's something that I personally like come up against, in the sense that like I'm a child of an immigrant, so is my husband, like I think privilege is like a hard, cold reality. Like it's like a cold shower, in this, and like when you're trying to kind of live this balanced life, and looking at others. Well, like sometimes privilege is just like the missing ingredient, that like is a barrier to, I think, barrier to entry. But I don't know. Just ranting now, but real talk.
No, thank you. I mean, one thing, and again, I can't, I don't have the same perspective that you have. One thing that I always wonder is like, what's the best way to do it? Like, well, actually, let me give it with examples. Like, I only know how to operate at things at like 120%. So like I throw myself at everything, and with an intensity that's just like unparalleled, right? It's like, I mean, for my first intellect, I have like a 75-page slide deck, right? It's just like, I don't know what the baseline, I kind of like benefit from the naivete of like, I don't know what these are like. So I'm just like, I'm just going to do it the way I would do it. And I always ask myself, I'm like, what would my life look like if I did things at 100%? What would my life look at like if I did things at 90%? Right. And for me, so like you could take something like quiet quitting, right? It's like, again, that ship has kind of sailed, right? It's like an increase in interest rates was the death sentence to quiet quitting. But I could probably operate in my life at 80%, and my life wouldn't be significantly different and holistically. But I am mentally, psychologically unable to allow myself to ever operate at that level. Now, again, I recognize my own privilege, like graduated without debt, heterosexual, cis, Asian American male, that comes with a lot of benefits. And certain challenges too in terms of kind of perception, like bamboo ceiling type things. But there's some amount of that there's room to play with that's in my own psyche. And then there's kind of the objective line that I need to clear. And a question that I'm always asking myself is like, what is this kind of imaginary story that I've told myself? And what is the true story that would still work, but there's some kind of emotional blocker that will never let me see it or get there? And an example that I give, again, it's one of extreme privilege, but like my wife and I plan on fully paying for our kids' college tuition. We have the money, we've saved for it. But if they went to college with loans of 50% of that or 30%, like with that, there's an argument that might actually be better for them. So to strive for this kind of like 100% is like the best outcome, it's like maybe it's actually not the best outcome for them. And I'm putting all this pressure on myself to give them 100%, but that might not even be the best outcome. So what happens if I start to pull at all those assumptions? Right? Because I think we could objectively say, like, I don't know, if your kids have 20% debt, probably not a death sentence, financial death sentence. And I know we can make a case that it actually might be beneficial because it might actually make them start thinking about trade-offs and things that 100% wouldn't make them think of. And so why am I taking all that downstream pressure of 100%, which is hard? It's a lot of money. It's $1,000 a month per kid from until they're 18, from the day they're born, if you want to give them a full ride to private university in the US. That's a lot of pressure for an outcome that maybe, again, everyone's going to have a different take on that. So I just leave that. That's how I approach these things. Daryl.
Yeah, I kind of relate a lot to giving my 120% all the time. And recently, in recent years, I think in the past 2 years, maybe I've started to reconsider and try and not always be operating at that efficiency. And I think what made me try and slow down is, I guess, after starting therapy after my degree. So I'm only 25 and I finished my degree like last year. And immediately after my degree, I started therapy because I felt like I wasn't really, I guess I felt like I lost the drive that I always had. So previously, I always wanted to go to MIT for my PhD or even for my degree to study physics. But then I think towards the end of my degree, I felt like that goal was unattainable. And then I think it caused me too much stress. And then I couldn't really focus in my last semester. And that's why I started, that's why I wanted to go to therapy, because during that last semester, I think I was starting to burn out from constantly trying to push myself to achieve this goal that I always had for myself. And then in therapy, I guess I learned that, I learned to question or find out the reason why I actually had this goal all along. Like always wanting to go to MIT. Like I never really questioned that dream, and I just thought that was like the best dream because that's the best university. But then deep down, when I asked myself, I think it stems from, I guess, insecurities, or maybe an unaffirmed core. And an unaffirmed core is basically this feeling of not feeling good enough deep down inside. So that's why you need to constantly achieve more to fill up that void you have inside of yourself. And then, yeah, so once I discovered that my dream of going to MIT could be related to that, then it made me stop and think, then is this dream kind of worth it? Because um, um, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's good to fill a void with more and more achievements, because deep down all of this, yeah, I think you have to fix it through your mindset, I guess, and how you see yourself, and not value yourself based on your achievements. So that's what made me kind of take a step back and try and, I guess what I'm trying to say is I changed a lot after that incident, after therapy, and I no longer think that the best thing in the world is to go to MIT to do my PhD. And instead, I think I would be, yeah, I'm just trying to rethink of what should I do instead that, yeah, is meaningful for me, because all this while I've been trying to pursue that goal, and yeah, I'm just not sure if that is what, yeah, is best, I guess, if it causes me so much stress.
Yeah. We're gonna, did you call it unaffirmed core? What was it?
Yeah.
Unaffirmed?
Mhm.
Unaffirmed core. Thank you for sharing that, Daryl. Nicholas, and then Katrina.
Yeah, Daryl, I really relate to that. Just, being sometimes unaware of where we're getting at, and we have all these goals, and then we realize it's not what we want. But there was one word that stuck to me, and that's the word efficiency. And it makes me think about the previous narrative around, giving your 100%. And I think a lot of it, at least on my side, has been, sometimes we focus on efficiency as in a very utilitarian sense, like profit and, something tangible. And at least in my case, and maybe, I would love to hear about all of you, your experience, but, so you have all these useless things, all these meaningful things, you have your arts, your dancing, your literature, you're having fun and actually enjoying life and not having to go to the doctor. And I always gave also my 150%, 120. Like I started working at 19, I would work like 14 hours, 14-hour days for no reason. Um, and that was just because I was valuing the efficiency and utilitarian side of things. And now, for example, that I'm kind of in like a rest period, I'm going through a master's in liberal arts, which has nothing to do with profit. And I'm reading and I'm writing and I'm dancing and I do some work. And for me, I'm still giving 100%. It's just not all of it going towards work. So it might be the case that some of you also consider, this, we're giving 120, 150, and I would love to hear from you. When you say that, are you referring to one task in specific, to all of them in specific? Where's the trade-off happen if you're always giving more than you're supposedly could have give, or what people on average give?
Oh. Beautifully said, Nicholas. So there's actually a section in the presentation, which we will get back to, that covers this. It's this concept of atelic and telic activities. So those of you who have been in some of my workshops before, and a telic activity is something that has a measurable outcome. And then an atelic activity is where the joy of the activity is purely inherent in the activity itself. So like you said, being in nature, reading literature, hanging out with friends. And again, if you're drawn to this type of presentation, this type of narrative, there's probably I suspect that you over index on outcomes that are measurable. And if something, I suspect that I mean, this is inter-intellect, so I don't know the audience as well, but I know in my community, people read way more nonfiction than fiction. in literature. Because like, what's the point of reading fiction? It's like, it doesn't make you better. So actually, I know Katrina had their hand up, but so go ahead if it's still something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the two topics that came up in the last few conversations of perfectionism and privilege. And then I wanted to tie it up with this like thing that I learned from Esther Perel about relationships that I think applies to the oscillation between stages of life. And I'll try to be quick with it. But I really relate to the perfectionism piece. And I can't remember what podcast it was. There was a tweet that was basically like, what about this situation makes this a catastrophic versus mildly irritating or a mild annoyance? And that's just something very personally that I'm trying to observe, is that there's certain things with standards of work that I find to be catastrophic. And a lot of my own reevaluation of my perfectionism is how do like the balancing act with it is how can I let myself actually just feel disappointed if something wasn't good enough, or someone's actually disappointed in something, but maybe I feel it's okay. Like a lot of that 80% good enough is an emotional task, honestly, of knowing that it will make me feel deeply uncomfortable when I don't have inbox zero, or when something's not to my standards, or when the person in front of me isn't like praising me for the standard of work. It is deeply uncomfortable. And I don't really know if there's anything that's going to quote unquote heal that or stop that, because it's a strength and a weakness. It's a strength of how I work and how I want to put something at a standard, but it's a weakness in how it feels inside. But I think my own response to that is learning how to sit with disappointment and how to sit with discomfort around things that I have no control over at a certain point. So that's something I thought about as like a fellow perfectionist in the room. And then the piece about privilege, it's just something that I'm thinking about a lot because I am in a 6-month sabbatical, but this is largely due to the partnership that I'm part of. You know, I was hard for me to put myself in this position, but it was a beautiful thing because I realized when you're in partnership with someone, like there's going to be a time in my life when I take care of my partner and, you know, in the same exact way. And it's just something I think about a lot because I don't think there's an easy answer necessarily to how like to my own relationship with what I received. And I just know that at some point in my life, I'm able to rest, and then I'll be able to take care of the people that have taken care of me. And that's all I really know as I think about that topic, that I do think is very complicated as you take it at like a systems level. And then the last part was just, I'm hearing all these things about like how do I be an 120% person, but also someone that values the sabbatical and like rest. And I'm still in the process of figuring it out, but it reminds me of this thing that Esther Perel did. She talks a lot about how do you breed attraction. And it's like, you actually can't have like love and comfort with someone and also breed attraction at the same time, but it's just like walking. You actually have to oscillate the two. And I kind of think that's how I'm going to end up trying things, is that I let myself be my crazy, 120% person, but then no, I need to do it in such a way that allows myself to take a break from being that person, because it's just not sustainable. Hopefully that works. I truly don't know, but yeah, those are just some thoughts that came in as everyone was talking.
Thank you so much. So much good stuff. You're like the librarian of it's like the amount of like quotes, like, oh, in this book and this resource and this tweet and this podcast. We'll have to get your reading list. Awesome. It's all the nonfiction. All right. It's funny. Y'all are good because you front ran a lot of the things that are coming up in this presentation. So I'm going to do we've already been at it for an hour and 45 minutes. But does anyone want a break, or do you want us to just plow through? You can either just break or plow through or keep going in the chat. Let's finish. Justin's going to grab a snack. Keep going. Okay. You can take the first 3 answers and run with it. All right, let me go back to this. Okay. These were a few questions that have come up in my coaching practice and in our course that really kind of help shake up people that are stuck on the achievement treadmill. So one of them is who am I without achievement? Right. And so it's a hard one for me personally. Am I playing the right game? I remember seeing someone say, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. It's like the pie eating contest. Why do I fear being ordinary? There's a relativeness, a relativity baked into that term. Is ordinary an objective, an absolute term? Or is it a relative term, right? This was a really important one. We talked about this with parenthood. Is do the people I love get my best energy? Because if they don't, what's the point? And there's seasons for everything. And then is this it? Right? Is this it? That's kind of, you're at the end of the achievement treadmill. Like, is this really it? Am I going to do this for the rest of my life? Since we've taken a few breaks, I'll let those sit with you, but please drop into the chat if any of these really, really resonate with you. Okay. How did we get here? Like, why there's a unique group of us on this call. Clearly, we have some overlapping tendencies, neuroses, dreams, ways of existing, and each of us are in our own journey. But how did we get here, right? We talked a lot about status, right? Keeping up with the Joneses, the green text bubble versus the blue text bubble. And I won't spend too much time on status, but it's I did a little bit of research on status for myself, and realized I thought that I would come to a place where I'm like, I'm above status, or I don't need to play status games. And only to realize that status, in one way, status originates as a survival mechanism. They did this experiment with, I think it was chimpanzees, where they were able to reshift the status within the family, or the, I don't know what you call the group, the gaggle of chimpanzees. And as they changed the status of them, and I forget exactly how they did it, by like, it might have been with like shelter, who had like access to the food, or who was protecting, or something like that, but they could change the status hierarchy. And the chimpanzees that had higher status lived much longer. And the ones that had lower status had like health disease and high cholesterol, right? And so there's an element of status that, status is is good for your health. There are many, many studies that show that higher status people live longer and have healthier lives. At the same time, status is this very strange things where it's the way that we sort. It's the way, because we're social beings, it's the way we sort ourselves out, right? So let's take a very, very simple example. It's like you just meet two people, right? Or let's say you're interviewing, right? You meet two people, and one person went to community college and the other one went to Harvard. It's like, as a human, you need some kind of classification mechanism to group people. It might be very, very blunt, but we're constantly making decisions that are related to other people, that are forcing us to interact with one another. And then lastly, this question of status is like, well, even if you say, I don't believe in status, you're making a status claim on yourself relative to others, right? You're saying the thing that you all worry about so much is something that doesn't matter to me. And so I only bring that up is because status is this like very confusing beast. We're not going to crack the code here, but it does inform a lot of the things. And status can be very, very, very subtle, right? A Volvo for a long time was not a high status symbol, but a Volvo in suburbia is a very high, it's like, I care about safety, I have money, but I also don't want to be too flashy. right? And so it's a very hard, even things that are not traditionally status markers become status markers. And so this relativeness with regards to our peers is why we can get so obsessed with achievement, achievement being a very obvious marker of status. Then there's money games, right? And I just wanted to bring up a few little anecdotes. There's this one study where they asked people with $1 million. They said, what would you need to be a 10 out of 10? How much more money would you need to be a 10 out of 10 on the happiness scale? And someone with $1 million said double. And then they asked someone with $3 million, how much more money would you need to be a 10 out of 10 on the happiness scale? And they said double. 5 million, double. 10 million, double. Y'all might not believe me, but the different study showed something similar. How much of your annual salary would you need to be less stressed? So the T on the line is the median, and the circle is how much more that they need. So if you could take the longer bars are slightly easier to read, but someone with $150,000 in salary needs to make $200,000 to feel less stress. If you look at the bottom right, 200,000, someone with $250,000 needs $350,000 to feel less stress. So the goalposts are always moving. This story really blew my mind. And this is another study that, again, it combines both, actually. If you're looking for a job, and one option is you can earn $100,000, but your peers earn double. And there's the other option where you earn less, $50,000, but your peers earn half. 50% of people will pick option B. That is the tide that we are wrestling with in these questions of achievement as it relates to external perception. 50% of people are willing to take less money just as long as they're better off than their peer group. Think about that. That's wild. Okay, this one. This is an interesting one. So blame neoliberalism, right? And again, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an economist, but there's a philosopher that the intellectual community probably knows way more about than the Rad Reads community. But it's his name is Byung-Chul Han, I believe. And he's written many books on burnout. And I'm just going to summarize his argument. This is a really interesting argument. If we can try to intellectualize the roots of why are we on these treadmills, right? And so Byung-Chul Han says, well, neoliberalism became the predominant political and economic system in the, I guess, 70s or 80s. And in its simplest form, it's like deregulation. Deregulation leads to globalization and free trade and, capitalism untethered. Now, he makes this argument that individuals also got kind of pulled into this trade. And he said in the past, we were what he calls obedience subjects, where we were governed by constraints. Like if you're a farmer, you will always be a farmer. You'll never own the farm. If you're a man, you marry a woman. You can't drink. You can't gamble, right? So it was a prohibitive society, and we were obedient subjects, a society with a lot of constraints. As neoliberalism deregulated the economic and political landscape, then we deregulated ourselves. You can be, every single one of you can be the CEO of Google. There are no constraints. Everything you can want or any desire you have, any dream that you have is within the realm of possibility. And we have removed all of the constraints and we have become achievement subjects. He calls them entrepreneurs of the self. Effectively, we turn the world into this giant marketplace. And we as individuals have become commodities in that marketplace. And so everything we do is a reflection of our market value. Read more literature, market value goes down. Read more business books, market value goes up. Listen to podcasts at 1 speed, market value goes up. Listen to podcasts at 2 speed, market value goes up faster. And that is this kind of systematic socioeconomic and cultural way. Like, we have become a commodity in the system that we have created. And so everything becomes this someone mentioned earlier, this utilitarian calculation of what is my market value? Is this adding to it? Is it detracting from it? We have become DIY entrepreneurs of ourselves. I'm going to do one more. Actually, I'm going to do 2 more, and then we'll pause because it'll be a natural pause. Trends of unworthiness. Daryl called it the unaffirmed core. And this is a story from one of my spiritual teachers, Tara Brach. And it's about a mother and a daughter. And the mother is in hospice, and she's going to pass any day. And the daughter is holding her hand. She's whispering in her ear, telling her that she loves her. She's meditating in the room next to her, in the room besides her. And the mother is basically in and out of consciousness and not saying much. All of a sudden, she just perks up out of her bed. And she says, all of my life, I thought something was wrong with me. What a waste. She dips back into unconsciousness and dies shortly thereafter. Now, Tara Brach, I think someone even mentioned, it might have been Nicholas or Daryl, it said that's like we're these leaky buckets, right? This not enoughness. And there's this analogy that I've heard others use is like, if you're attracted to, if you're in this room, you have a hole in your bucket, and we just keep dumping more and more and more achievement into the bucket, but without even realizing that there's a hole in the bucket. Just, you need to keep stuffing the bucket with achievement, and it might even take many decades to realize that there's a hole in the bucket. And so many people operate from this trance of unworthiness, this starting point that I'm not good enough. I know I feel that deeply. I'm not good enough. Oh, how can I make myself feel good? More achievement, more achievement, more achievement, which is why that brief interaction with 10-year-old K makes it's like perspective shifting, right? Because it really shifts that narrative at a very physical, somatic level. Last slide, and I'll pause for a break, right? Some of you may be familiar with the Enneagram kind of personality model of sorts. And there's the Enneagram 3, which is the achiever type. And the achiever type is, someone used the word efficient. They are effective. They are charismatic. They are self-assured. By all benchmarks on society, they fucking kick ass. They get promoted. They're financially secure. They light up the room around them, right? They are the superstars of modern society. Society celebrates them. But what's their fear? What's their motivation, right? Again, it's a leaky bucket. They are driven by an inherent sense of unworthiness, an inherent sense of not enough. And achievement is the way that they can satiate themselves and make themselves feel whole. And that works well, but when it's pushed to its extreme, self-assuredness turns into a fear of failure. Charm turns into narcissism. Ambition becomes exploitative and opportunistic, right? In other words, we turn into Patrick Bateman on Wall Street, right? What happens when achievement goes untethered? I'm actually going to stop our prompts. I put in the prompts because I didn't know if we were going to have enough things to talk about. Silly me. But I'll stop there, right? So we talked about status games. We talked about this never-ending goal line, right? Like taking a job for less money just to be better than your peers. we talked about this kind of entrepreneurs, like we all have this market value where these commodities that need to be traded and valued in this kind of fiercely competitive economy. And then there's this achiever, this kind of this trance of unworthiness, achievement as an overcompensation for a deep sense of unworthiness. So open it up, kind of jump ball here. Astrid,
Hi. So yeah,
hello.
I've been silent like the whole meeting because I'm feeling like a really big sense of dissonance here. Because so using your framework, I'm like an eager beaver. I'm like Nicholas and Daryl. I'm like very young, 23, and so I'm just recently graduated. And we're talking about like status, talking about games, and um, what dissonance I'm feeling is that um in the scale, I mean, like I'm from a country, I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. So like I'm from a country where only 5% of people have like bachelor degrees. Like the scale of money you're talking about here, even the 25K, it's enormous, right? Like the scale of money and opportunities and like jobs and everything is just like a totally different scale to what I'm used here. So maybe so like, and when you're very young, I guess in this age, like the message, like the window of opportunity is like you're young. You should take all the risk. You should get all the jobs, right? Because if you don't take this window of opportunity now, you'll be old and sad and I don't know, poor or whatever. Must I just insert whatever kind of like that messaging, right? Like they're giving you because I mean, for a class comparison, like okay, maybe you might be sad, but you'll have experience at BlackRock, for example, right? Like especially compared to you're from this like third world country with like totally different scales of money. And but like listening to everyone is like yeah, it really doesn't give you happiness, right? It really doesn't. Even achieving those levels of money or prestige or status doesn't give you happiness. But what do you do when you're young? And like they say, like if you don't work hard enough, you're gonna regret it later in the future. Because yeah, I don't know, sometimes people say like I didn't work hard enough, I didn't take enough risk. And that's kind of like the sense of dissonance I'm feeling right now, because it's very clear that there is a point that it's not worth it anymore. It sacrifices your health and happiness to a point. But when you're young and you still have all these opportunities and time and whatever that you can sacrifice, isn't it worth the sacrifice? So I'm just kind of like, absorbing everything right now. Thank you.
Great question. Who wants it? Who wants to take that one?
Taylor hasn't spoken yet, so I'll let Taylor take it.
Yeah, I think about that one a lot too. So I'm 41, and I don't know, we'll go into some stories later too, but like I think I'm at the spot too where I'm like, yeah, I'm 41. I don't have the energy to do the startup thing like I would have had in my 20s to put in the 80-hour work weeks. And I think that could have been good if it was directed into something that really resonated with me and served both like money and or meaning for a while, or a mix of both. But like I think I misspent that energy and time and effort doing those 80-hour work weeks for IBM and other companies like that. And I do regret the hell out of that, because I do think while I will be able to have more motivation in the future in certain respects for certain companies and situations, I don't think it's the infinite amount that I would have had earlier on. But I also recognize it would have been a little bit healthier to maybe do 60-hour work weeks instead of 76-hour ones and be a little bit healthier. And I ended up burning out and taking a year off and doing yoga teacher training, and then ended up in Bali, Indonesia for a little bit. So, where you end up may just be the same spot. So I don't know. I would say you could, direct that energy in a way, even if it's a risk and there's a bet, into a space that you're careful and discerning where you direct it.
Beautiful. Jonathan was going to add something.
Yeah, let's see if we got this going. Okay, so you asked about it in terms of sacrifice, like, do I sacrifice something to do it? And I think first, the framing of it in terms of a cost, like how much cost do you want to pay for it, is probably a healthier way to think about it, at least, because it's like, do I sacrifice my health for something? That means, it means, at least to me, something very drastic in terms of something else. And I think 80-hour work weeks is a sacrifice. And I think 50-hour work weeks are more of a cost than a sacrifice, let's say, for a little bit of time. But one way to think about, especially the earlier kind of career things, is there's this, I've picked it up from, like, I think by Deep Work by Cal Newport and a few other things. There's this like motivation hygiene theory that this psychologist came up with, which basically says the things that if you don't have, or have, if they're negative, you don't have it. So let's put it this way, like the hygiene factors are things like salary, status, and work conditions. If they're very bad, your life is very bad. Like, so you're like, my salary is way underrepresented, or my status is super way under status, or work conditions are terrible. Any of those things being bad is like a clear signal that things are wrong. But making those things amazing isn't a source of motivation and isn't a source of things going forward. So if you absolutely crank on this, on the salary, not having good salary is a source of pain, but having a hell of a huge salary is not necessarily that big of a positive. Same with like minimum, like having a horrible commute. Like, wow, I've optimized for no commute at all. You're not really like wanting to do that. So the things to try to optimize for, to maximize, things that give you motivation on this thinking, are things like, do you have challenging work? Are you personally growing in your work? Do you have responsibility? Do you have like some sort of involvement in the decision making of what's happening? A sense of importance to an organization, or a sort of importance to like something that you yourself want to change in the world. Those things are all like, if you have those, I can motivate you to work and continue to do things there. So I think it's important to kind of know whether the factor you're thinking about is a hygiene or a motivation factor, just as one way to think about it. And then if it's a hygiene thing, don't index on that entirely and try to like slide that needle all the way to the other side, or slide it to the other way to make your life better, because it's not the right handle. Get yourself to neutral on that one, and then find some other piece of it to maximize.
Beautiful, Jonathan. Thank you. Anyone else? I think this is a phenomenal question, because I think it's actually relevant irrespective of age.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I'm not looking at my screen either. Sorry. So if anyone has their hand up, just let me know. Does someone else? Okay, great. So I just wanted to say, to go back to your slides, I felt like a little attacked, just kidding. In the sense that, like, I think I've been exploring like my own limiting beliefs recently, and I think I do, it was really great to hear you kind of connect certain dots for me around like, limiting beliefs and how they tie into kind of the achiever, like what you can observe with like high achievers, right? Because like, yeah, and that's it. Like it feels like even when you achieve something, it's like, okay, well, you can always do more. There's always something else, right? And so, to kind of go back to my earlier point, like I think for me, the next challenge is like, how do I manage that shifting goalpost, right? And really, I super wonderful life, super appreciative, and I have a lot of gratitude towards everything in my life, but like I am a very driven person, and I think my drive needs managing, like I think it's not like it needs to be managed like actively, like I think for so long it's been this thing that's like, the rest of me has been along for the ride, and like now the rest of me is like, hey, we have needs too, so yeah, so I'm like, do you have more on this? Are there more slides?
Yeah. No, and thank you, Amal, and I saw Nicholas has his hand up, but I'll just do a brief aside. For me, again, I've done guided psychedelics once, and so I'm not this like hardcore evangelist of it. It was just a therapy assisted thing that I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. But I remember that I was going through all this in my head if you haven't done it, you're like, in this case, I had an eye mask on. It was the middle of like a Thursday afternoon, and I'm on like extreme doses of MDMA and psilocybin, and laying down. And there's a therapist next to me. My wife's next to me on her own journey. But needless to say, there was a moment in time when I just started kind of shaking and lightly convulsing. And all that I kept saying was, I just want to be a good boy. I just want to be a good boy for like what felt like 2 straight hours. And I was like, wow, like that just like one thing. And I've had many moments. That's probably the most intense one. I've had many moments not related to being on, mind altering substances, but it's just like, wow, it's just like this. There is a little boy that needs to feel seen and needs to feel validated and needs to feel safe. And somewhere in the journey, that little boy learned that achievement was a way to get that stuff. And at some point, that big boy, that 44-year-old man, has to realize, it kind of goes back to the parts thing. It's like this thing, it's not a bad thing, but the way it served you in the past is not serving you anymore. Kind of like the way you described it, Amal. It's like the autopilot. And so a lot of, just to briefly go through, like I've been reading a lot about this, like Enneagram 3. That's one. So much of Tara Brach's work is around this. There is a lot in IFS about this. It's like the taskmaster, the executioner. There's a lot of like meditations. I'm actually about to do a attachment theory therapy, where a lot of it is like kind of like what you wanted from your parents and you didn't get. And I was raised very, I have secure attachment, but there are things that I needed from my parents that I never got. And so there's a way to basically rebuild those things as a grown up. So that's just a handful. My wife, I haven't done it. My wife's done a lot of inner child work, Hoffman Institute being one of the places. There's a lot of different places, and I don't even think I'm scratching the surface. It's juicy when you get there. You're like, oh.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. Is this recording going to be shared out, by the way?
I don't know. I don't know how your intellect works on this stuff. I suspect it is.
Okay. Yeah, no,
I'm happy to share the slides. So if anyone, we'll exchange contact information at the end, and
yeah, no, thank you so much. I just quickly say that, like, for me, as part of this, like, exploring my limiting beliefs, it's been like, I've realized that, like, a lot of my, like, sense of like, oh, not good enough, it actually comes from like my parents pushing me to like to limits which they thought were necessary in order to kind of produce like a productive member of society, you know what I mean? And that like happens a lot with immigrant kids, where like they're just pushed a lot to excel. And so I think like nobody thought that they were being harmful, but like here we are now. So thank you so much for sharing that.
And I will add on that, I think that, I don't think our parents, I'll speak for my parents, immigrant parents as well, is they didn't mean it, but the what I internalized was that they loved me conditionally. So achieve, get love. Don't achieve, don't get love.
Yeah, 100%.
What I internalized. And so like when you see it that way, it's like all this makes, like, I make so much sense to myself. Like duh. If that's the message you internalize in the first 18 years of your life. And I'm actually very careful to like, how do I apply that to my kids? Because I do have very high standards for myself. But again, I think it goes back to the point I made to you earlier, Amal. Like I have these like crazy high standards for myself, but they're not like, they're almost like this construct in my own head. They have like nothing much to do with reality, other than people who go hard 150% tend to be like rewarded by business and society. That's like the only way it interacts, and is not to dismiss that. And so I really do think about, it's like when I push my kids, how much of how much of them am I pushing them because it's like this healthy baseline of motivation that I want to have them to have, and how much am I pushing them because I still haven't fully processed this side of me and I'm dumping it on them. And I don't know what that ratio is, right? And I'm not going to get it right, but I'm trying to bring as much awareness into that. Nicholas and then Oliver.
Yeah, I wanted to add a quick note on something related to what you were mentioning, Amal, and actually something that you made me think about earlier. So you were talking about, drive, and we have this limiting beliefs, but sometimes it feels like also like, do I need all this drive? Like, do I need to be all in all of this? And I was also thinking about what Astrid said about, again, I was born in Colombia and I've been in touch with the US since, forever. So I've always in this mix of, cultures. And I think what has really helped me is related to what you said, Amal, you mentioned like hippie friends. Um, I have a lot of different friends, and fortunately, they are from all over the world, from different backgrounds, different levels of wealth. And I think what I try to do is I try to establish a season of my life that I'm in. It could be a season of like hustling. So I'm like, okay, I'm down to work 14-hour days, and that's what I'm happy to do. Or I'm happy to just not work the entire day for the next 2 weeks. And whenever I'm gravitating towards whatever extreme I'm not happy with, I just start getting in touch with friends who embody those things. So if I want to rest, I'll be going more into like the hippie route, for example. Or if I want to work, for example, I arrived yesterday in Mexico City because I know a lot of people from tech are here in Mexico City. So I'm like, okay, let's sign up for a co-working space now that I'm trying to build something, and let's get in touch with these people. And as soon as I get to this place where I don't want to be because I don't want to burn out, it's not good for my health, I'll just go somewhere else and I will appreciate these people. But now I need other types of people. And that has really helped me with those challenges that you were mentioning. And it all comes down to a lot of just awareness of how you're feeling, but also awareness of where you want to go. Like, am I comfortable with oh, it looks like he left. Yeah, he left. The forgot his name, the guy who did the PhD. And it's just like the cost, like you have to be aware of the cost or sacrifice that you're doing. And I try to remain aware of that and just, change scenes, change people. There are always positive and cons with everything. So it's a good thing to do is just be aware of what you're getting into.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love that framing of focusing, like having a season and being intentional about what you want to put forward. That really makes sense for somebody that's multifaceted, multidimensional. And are you sure you're 25? just thank you so much. I actually have to drop, you guys. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amal. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, guys.
Oliver, I'll hop to you in 1 second. I just wanted, Nicholas, I wanted to circle back to Astrid's question of like what do you tell someone in their early 20s? And I think Nicholas captured it well. I think there's seasons, right? And I think in my 20s, I did work like 80-hour weeks. And I don't know if I would do that again, but I will say that for me, I worked extremely hard for 15 years and it gave me so much financial independence that like my life is much better because of that. But again, you have to look at it in like big blocks of time. And there were some I have high blood pressure because of that. I have like no enamels left on, like there were costs to that as well, that financial independence. So that would be one thing. But there's seasons, right? And now I have a season of young kids and like I don't want to actually work that hard because I want to spend a lot of time with my kids. And then once they leave the house, like I've always said like I might actually start a company when my kids go to college because I'm like, then they won't even like need me, right? And maybe it'll be a very different company that I would have started in my 20s. But I think the thing that Nicholas also said is like to have that lens of self-awareness, right? Because I think that what I think we've realized is it's almost like the behavior of addicts is like, oh, you can have one drink and you're fine. Like one drink tastes great, and then you have like 3 drinks and you're kind of like trying to make a pain go away. And then 6 drinks, like you have a problem, right? And I feel like in any of these seasons, the lines get really blurry because like, you know, you can delude yourself. You're like, oh, this is a season for hustle, but you're like, it's been a season for hustle for 20 years. Like that's like it's only been one season. Like what you and so I think like the thing that I always tell younger folks is like there's a season for everything, but invest time into developing your self-awareness skills because your self-awareness skills allow you to call bullshit on yourself. Because the reality is, I mean, a therapist and a good life coach might call bullshit on you, but truly at the end of the day, the only person that can call bullshit on you is yourself. And we see many, many, many people who never call bullshit on themselves their entire lives. And that's a tragedy. You know, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. And that's a, you know, some may view that as a tragedy. And so that I think this combination, and there's so many ways to develop self-awareness skills. Like it's almost like saying like learn how to breathe, right? There's a million different ways to do it. And so I just share that with Astrid, which is basically, you know, my way of reframing what Nicholas had said. Oliver, thanks for being patient.
No worries. So I have a quick story I want to share just for context, and then a question for you, Key, or anyone who wants to answer it. So I recently, very recently, participated in a ceremony called the Tezmacel, where you go into a very dark sweat lodge facilitated by shamans, and you pray to what they call the 4 directions. I won't go into the whole experience, but the 3rd direction was praying to yourself or your emotional body, where for me, it was just intense pain, right? Just like really an encounter with the nature of suffering itself. And in the 4th direction, we gave thanks to our ancestors. And that's when you make the connection that this suffering was also our ancestors' suffering, that they suffered so much to provide the lives that we all live now. And with that, you are just filled with gratitude, right? And I wonder, right? I'm also a child of a first generation immigrant family. And I wonder if our parents conceived of achievement as we do, where it's achievement versus happiness, or the baseline state was just suffering in order to provide for their families and a better life for their children. And this is something that I'm trying to figure out myself because I have similar thoughts. I'm about to get into family planning, right? I'm in that stage of life.
Yeah.
So, Key, for you, what is your relationship with, you know, providing? I'd imagine that, you know, given the conversations we've discussed, we're a little bit past financial security, or right? But like, what is it that you try to provide to your children, and how does achievement fit into that?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question and a great observation. I'll first go back to, and Maslow's hierarchy has its flaws, but you know, like the bottom is, you know, basic needs, and then the top is self-actualization. And it's not, you know, many people will refute I haven't given it a ton of thought, but it doesn't work. It's not this kind of linear hierarchy, but let's just use that a very simple thing to talk about parents. So it's like first generation immigrants were predominantly concerned with the first 2 levels of Maslow's hierarchy for the many years of their lives, which is like, how can my family survive in this foreign country with like no family or less family? In my case, like they had left, you know, civil war in Cambodia, and like, you know, usually leaving from like a bad place or a place where things weren't going great. And then we get in and they're like, they pay for our college, and, you know, we're educated and you work at Facebook and all those things. And then like, you know, I have very few worries about basic needs being covered. All right. And so then we're like, well, how do I get enlightened or self-actualized, or, you know, like the higher part? And so that's kind of how I think of like, it's like a kind of pithy way to think about that. I think it's very flawed, but it's a simplistic way of kind of seeing how things evolve, and you can like push that down one generation further. Or like I've spent, you know, 10. I'll probably spend the next 30 years of my life thinking about what it means to self-actualize. Like, what does that mean for my daughter's 9, right? In terms of providing for our kids, I think it's a really, I do think back to this question that Amal had asked is like, you know, I feel like I'm in a very fortunate position where this is a funny story, but I basically started investing for my kids' college before I was single. And so I put money in a 529 plan when my daughter was like -6. And so when she was born, it was done. Like if it just compounds at 6%, it was like full for like, and that was because I thought I was going to go to grad school. But anyway, so I do think a lot about financial security. Like I think that like I want to pay for their education. We want to pay for their education. You know, my wife and I have talked about things like there's going to be money left over. You know, we're smart investors. We're like I'm a decent earner. So there's going to be like, what do we do with the leftover money, right? And we definitely, I don't know if you're familiar with this like die with zero concept. It's not something that I like. It's a kind of like an interesting construct. But I think one thing that really sticks with me is like my parents, the situation in which I grew up with taught me resourcefulness because my parents, they didn't open many doors for me. Like they put food on the table and they gave us education and love. Like they didn't buy us stuff. They didn't, you know, there was no like fancy things in growing up. So I learned resourcefulness from a very young age, and we didn't have a ton of resources. Now my kids will have a lot of resources. How can I teach them resourcefulness? Right? Because it's kind of hard to learn resourcefulness amidst a lot of resources. And I don't even know if it's possible. Right? And so maybe, and now I'm just spitballing because I've never been asked this question so directly. Maybe like, so I think about often, so I went to Yale and then worked on Wall Street and I do fundraising for Yale and everyone's like, oh, you want your kids to go to Yale? I'm like, I don't know. Like Yale was great. It opened tremendous amount of doors for me. It's a phenomenal, like to this day, it provides that's sorting benefit. You go to a party, you go to a conference, like just sorts you out really quickly. Tremendous benefits to me. Do I want my kids to go there? Like, let's just say I have a lot of friends who went to Yale who are very wealthy and very unhappy. So like going to Yale by no means do I believe is like the key to happiness, right? Which kind of goes back to Astrid's question, which is like, you kind of need that self-awareness to be like, God, I'm on this thing that everyone says makes you happy. And like, I'm not happy. Like, do I get off this thing or what? So I think where I've landed, and my wife and I talk about this often, is that we want we want to teach our child how to be self-aware, our children how to be self-aware. We want to teach them how to be kind. We want to teach them how to regulate their own emotions. And that can mean a lot of things, right? And then we want to show them unconditional love. I don't know, like I go to meetups with my friends and they're already plotting their like giving strategy to get into Yale. And I'm like, ooh, like I really don't care. I mean, I would be excited because I like the place, but I don't think it's like some major unlock for them in their lives. And it might actually be a disservice in some regards, just like it might be a disservice to pay for their entire college education, right? It might be a disservice, like we talk about, like helping them on their first down payment for a house. That might be a major disservice for them. And it could also be the greatest gift possible, right? Especially where you look at US home prices today. So I think there's none of these factors that we can control, but if we can give them the tools, like the mental tools to appreciate it or not appreciate it, to motivate for the right reasons, to not get caught up in envy. Like it's almost like that's like the best education that I can give them. And whether they go to Yale or don't go to college, like that almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, Key, thank you first for all the perspective. Just a quick follow-up, and thank you for the space. So going back to teaching your kids resourcefulness and climbing Maslow's hierarchy, right? I do wonder if achievement is a vehicle to teach them resourcefulness, because to your earlier slides, there's never enough. There's always scarcity, and there's always a higher bar to meet, right? For quite a few reasons. At least that's the way that I've contextualized it. So part of that thinking, and this is a bit of a tangent, is that, hey, when we think about when will I have enough, I think, when will all of my future generations have enough? Or humanity have enough, as we expand that circle of caring and empathy? And obviously never. But something has to create that sort of resourcefulness so you can actually climb Maslow's hierarchy and reach self-actualization. Else, I mean, how are you going to self-actualize if you don't know how to move through the world effectively? And I guess the question is something like, and I'm having a difficult time articulating this, right? Is rather than achievement, and I'm just speculating that maybe it's a vehicle towards self-actualization of climbing Maslow's hierarchy, is there a specific thing that you want to point your kids towards? If not Yale, right, which is a forcing function for resourcefulness, is there something that you want to point them towards, or maybe give them a safety net that they can move from?
Yeah. Ooh. I don't know. And see, this is where it's like hard to know. It's like fish in the water, because like I've lived in the water of achievement for so long that like I don't even know what the baseline is. One thing I think about is like craft and like yeah, craft I think is a word that comes often. And if I think about like, but even like putting this presentation together, it's like, how can I imbue this presentation with like my craft? It's my craft. And it's not like, I don't want it to be like the best presentation ever. It's just like, it's like there's this kind of like third axis of like the Z axis of something, right? And maybe I'm naive, or maybe I've spent too much time in kind of like non-achievement circles, but I do like, when you meet someone who's passionate about something and who just like deeply, it's like, I feel like if you can uncover that in yourself, right? Like so many of my coaching clients, they're post-financial, post-achievement, and they're like, I don't know what makes me come alive. I'm not passionate about anything besides like building businesses, right? And so I do feel like, there's this craft, this intentionality, this passion that comes, that like is part and parcel with aliveness. And but it's also like one of the hard, like you can't like learn it in school, right? Like you can't like learn aliveness in school, right? And so I wonder if there's a way to communicate that and to showcase that and to demonstrate that. And again, it's almost like maybe that sits on top of everything. And it's like, if you could, and again, look, my kids are young, so like I could be completely off the mark with everything I'm saying here. Like time will tell. But what if it's like there's this like meta game of like these kind, self-aware people that know how to find aliveness.
Yeah.
Like, what does that person look like when, like, yeah, maybe that person will probably never be the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Or maybe Goldman Sachs will have changed so much in 25 years that is actually like those attributes that I just described, in theory, could be the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
And it also could be struggling financial artist in, deep Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Could be both. And both could have deep, deep life satisfaction on completely different life paths. Now, I could be like I could be extremely naive here. Extremely naive. Most people, my peers, if my friends heard me saying this, they'd be like, "You fucking lost your mind."
Yeah.
Because that's not how you got to where you are, and I don't know.
For what it's worth, as someone who doesn't have kids yet, it doesn't sound wrong to me. It really reminds me of Rick Rubin's, like, just do the best that you can possibly do, love it absolutely, and then just give it to God as an offering.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to say not achieving or striving. But
it's a very, like, I've been deeply influenced by, if you haven't picked up on it yet, by Buddhism. And so, same with Rick, it's not surprising that you see that same kind of language and ethos in that. I think that it's also, there's a criticism of Buddhism in secular circles that, like, a lot of people use it like ex post. And so they're like, oh, like, I'm so successful and, like, I believe in this thing and it's because of that thing, right? And, like, I think, I'm very wary of that. I'm very wary of the spiritual dialogue and, like, saying more than what it feels in my, like, core, than, like, what it brings into like my pragmatic life. Hugo.
I think you actually start to answer some part of the question that I have. So, for someone who lived life, so yeah, I'm talking about me. So I'm 38 years old. I had this entrepreneurial career, and I think I had you mentioned that you were 35 when you left, I think, Wall Street, and with no plan, that kind of stuff. So I was almost 35. I was 34, 35 when I sold the company, and also was a life-changing event for me. And so I was very driven by achievement. I think I really like my work, so it didn't feel like I was working too much, but my mind was 100% being sucked by work, and I realized that I didn't want to live this way anymore. It was good. What led me where I am, and like feeling financial secure, the kind of stuff. But right now I'm feeling in this more or less post-achievement, post-financial stage. And what I'm trying to answer to myself, I already have a few answers, but and how should I live life from now on? Like, the first question was what word means to me from now on, but in a more broad perspective, how to live life, if not just for achievement or mainly for achievement was. And I don't have any kids, and I don't want to have kids. It's just me and my wife, and we are happy with that. I already had therapy to decide if I wanted to have kids or not. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that came to me. So yeah, this post achievement professional feels like where I am now, but I wonder how to live from now on. I'm gonna say something which was very crazy for me to think related to that one of these days. So I was traveling from one city in Brazil to another. I was coming back home, and I was on an airplane travel, and the airplane started to shake a little bit, and I was okay, maybe. I started to fear about my life, and maybe if I was going to die. It was very fast, like a few seconds. And I noticed that it looked like that it was enough. Like was strange. Like I'm 38, but I'm happy. And if I die, it's kind of okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what should I do from now on?
Yeah.
It's like I don't want. I'm not living for the future. I'm living for the now, and I just want to keep living the way that I'm living. But is this it? Is this the new it?
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I mean, well, kudos to you to getting to that point, but you know, it's a little bit, I think it was Oliver that asked at the beginning. It's like it gives you the off ramp, right? Making the banker gives you the off ramp. And here you are with the off ramp, but you still have the question. It's like, and you said like, how do I live I think, how do I live my life? And you know, I would maybe like modify that slightly. It's like, what is a life well lived? Right? And guess what? I have good news and bad news. I have good news is that people have been asking this question since the beginning of time. And I have bad news is that no one's come up with the answer.
Yeah. And my question was that actually, so I know that this is very different for everyone. So have you thought about that for you, and what you have, what are your thoughts on that for your own journey?
I have thought of it a lot for me, and I think it changes a lot. But I think there's two words that come up. It's peace and love. And peace is really more like inner peace. Is like, imagine you could like cut open, you know, your brain, and then there'd be like a body of water, like an ocean or a lake or a hurricane or a tsunami or, you know, 10-foot waves or the stillest water. It's like to me, there's an aspiring state that I want to be in where it's just like a calm pond, right? This kind of deep inner peace where there's no voices like, you should do this, why didn't you do this? Or this person has more. There's no envy. There's no kind of unhealthy fear, just like this, like usually of like mortality and things like that. So like this like deep sense of peace, right? And look, like, I don't know, I see it was just like I don't know, Ali Abdaal has like a New York Times best-selling book, and we're friends and super jealous, right? And so I'm not at peace because someone else's success will make me jealous. And how do I get closer to finding that peace? Right? How can I go from a place where I'm like, oh, I'm jealous to like, God, I'm like crying tears of happiness for his success. Right? So that's kind of peace. And then the other one is kind of like, you know, we said in one of the slides, when you take the achiever type too far, it breeds like deep narcissism. And I gotta say, like, I'm kind of obsessed with myself. Like, I think I'm really talented. I think I'm a decent looking person. I think I'm a good friend. I think I'm a good writer, you know? And it doesn't, and those are all, that's great, but I think that there's an unhealthy way in that I need those things to make me feel whole. And I believe that there's a way where I can have those things, but they're just like, cool that I'm a good writer versus like, guys, pay attention, I'm a good writer. And so I believe that and then I believe that everything downstream from that is like an openness to love, an openness to care for others, an openness to see other people's suffering, an openness to leave the world a better place, right? And so I think that for me, a lot of like, I'll give you an example. Talk about writing books. A lot of people, you know, they're like, okay, you've been an online creator, you have an audience, you're a good writer, like you know how to do marketing, you should write a book, right? And I kind of want to write a book, but I just don't feel like, just because people tell me I should write a book, like I don't really want to, right? And I was thinking about this the other day. Imagine you could wave a magic wand and you're like Kay has Ali's book, New York Times bestseller, millions of copies sold, speaking circuit, $20,000 a talk. I'm like, whatever, that's not going to change my capacity to love others. It's not going to make me less self-obsessed. And it's definitely not going to bring me more peace. Like I know I've experienced enough. This is where like having a lot of achievements is a good thing. I've achieved enough things to know that they haven't changed me fundamentally to my core. So why would I keep chasing them? Now, again, I believe that I will write a book one day. I believe that it will be good. But I don't need to do that to make me feel a certain way right now. And maybe, hopefully, ever. And that's the place where I'd love to get to in my life, writ large, for everything that I do. And I think and someone asked me, like, what are your goals for this year? And I have no goals. There's only one thing I want to do is I want to meditate for an hour and 20 minutes every day. Up from 40 minutes. It's basically double. And I do actually believe, and this is my own spiritual path, but it's like when I can sit for that long, everything, there's just so much peace in everything. And I'm just like, well, why don't I just go do more of the thing that brings me that peace? And like, look, you know, I still cranked out a 51-page deck, you know, in 48 hours. So like, I know how to do work, and I'm proud of the work, but it doesn't consume me, right? I never get nervous about a presentation anymore. Just because it's like, I know that I did my best, and I'm at peace with that. Nicola, I'm sorry, Daryl.
Yeah, I just think I have an answer to Hugo's question about, or your question about what is life well lived.
Let's hear it. I'm taking notes.
No. Yeah. So I guess when I was younger, I thought it was achievement, and I thought it was fulfilling my dreams of studying at MIT or being really successful or getting really rich. I thought that was like a life well lived because that's what you see. The media says that would make you happy. But then I don't know, even though I'm just 1 year out of college and I just started working as a you could say a scientist at a startup, a quantum computing startup. I'm starting to feel like, yeah, maybe it doesn't really give you the it didn't really give me the satisfaction that I thought I would feel working in this job. And one of the main reasons I feel is because of my own mind or my thoughts that I have while working. Because yeah, so while working, you kind of get these thoughts of you're not good enough, or you keep comparing yourself to the people around you, because since you're in such a high performing company, everyone else is also equally as good as you, and then you start to feel like imposter syndrome, and you start to feel um that you're not that good, and then that makes you feel bad about yourself, and then yeah, it's just a bad spiral. And what I realized is that yeah, I'm not sure. You always compare yourself to others, and then you always bring your own self down somehow. And the only thing that made me, or let me just put it this way, the most peace I ever felt with, I think, is with, I guess, religion instead of work. But yeah, my relationship with religion is also quite complicated because previously, I didn't really quite believe in it because I'm a very logical person, and then, yeah, I mean, like, at face value, you wouldn't think that religion is true because the evidence for it isn't that concrete compared to like science and stuff. But then, what I found, while just giving religion a shot and just like asking more people about it, like asking people who have more experience in it than me, is that, and trying it out for myself, it just, yeah, I never feel the same sense of peace that I feel whenever I'm like, I guess, praying or just meditating. It's just a really different sense of peace compared to, yeah, getting more and more achievements. Like, I don't think that will ever give me peace or working. And somehow I feel that that's why I'm kind of like trying to start to look more into spirituality instead of achievement, because that's the only area of my life that I feel that gives me kind of lasting fulfillment or happiness so far. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I agree with the well, my experience with the spirituality is like and again, I've been drawn towards a lot of Buddhist scripture and talks and things like that. But it's I agree with Nicholas in that it's like you could give me like any productivity book, any business book. It's like I'll read it, but it's like the it's almost like eating candy. Whereas a spiritual text, a sacred text, is like a really well cooked meal that you can like that you'll remember, right? And I mean, I think like funny enough, like this feels like very post achievement. It's like I'll give you an example. Is like a friend of mine, um, post achievement, post financial, $50 million exit at 33, and he's like I'm lost. He's like, I know that I don't want to start another company. I know how hard that is. I have no hobbies. I don't care about anything besides business. He's like, I love my kids, but I don't want to spend more than like a couple hours with them a day. And I get that. Like, he's like, I don't know. He's like, this is the most lost I've ever felt in my life. He's the furthest on the matrix, top right corner, most lost. He looked dejected on the phone call. We have a men's group. He looked dejected. But the door is closed for him on spirituality. He's like, I'm not interested. I don't believe it's kind of what Nicholas said. There's no facts to prove that that it's true, that it works, that this or that. Closed door on religion and spirituality and meditation and all that stuff. So he's not in it. He's again, it feels so weird to say like someone with like 33-year-old with $50 million is like not in the happy place. Like, but that's kind of the crux of this conversation. Yeah, I agree. Ashe, philosophy, and that was the joke I made to Hugo. Is like people have literally been asking this question since the beginning of time. Well, folks, we made it 2 hours and 53 minutes. I did not know. There's an entire section that I didn't cover, but to be honest, it was all to stimulate conversation. So I'll share the deck with you all. I'm gonna drop in, I mean, you all can find me on the socials, but I'll drop in my email. I always love to just hear how it went for you, and if there's like things that are open loops for y'all. I'd love to stay in touch. I think for those of you who don't know, haven't listened to our podcast, we have a podcast called the Examine Life Podcast. And so every week we talk about one of these questions with a guest. It's not like a Tim Ferriss style podcast where, people come and promote their books. It's really just like kind of like, let's try to deconstruct this together. So that's the Examine Life podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We have a newsletter, radreads.co. I'm super active on socials, particularly Twitter, which is probably where a lot of you found this event. And for those, we have coaching programs that are actually very akin to this. There's kind of like remember the red bar of the post achievement. That's kind of like our group coaching programs. And then the right quadrant kind of post achievement, post financial is the one-on-one work that I do with folks. So if that resonates with anyone, just shoot me an email. Awesome. Thank you all so much. This was a true joy.
Thank you for facilitating the space, Key. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. It's really,
Thank
really
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you again, Kay.
everyone.
Also, it was great.
Have a great day.
You too, and to all of you. Bye.